Hey there, viewers, and welcome back to the Self-Made Auto Channel. That's a 2009 Chrysler. It's the Town and Country. It's the Touring. It's got the big 3.8, and it's from the auction. And remember, not all cars from the auction are bad, but all bad cars are at the auction. So it's a used car guy special here. The battery dies overnight, or sometimes quicker, within a few hours. Brought it in yesterday, and when he dropped it off, I let her sit for an hour or so, and then checked it for a draw using the common methods that we typically do that I've showed you in other videos, where we check voltage drop across the fuses until we find, you know, the source of the current draw. In which this case, I got some very erratic readings, and I decided, you know what, it's late in the day, let's nix this job and unhook the battery, throw the battery charger on it, and get it up to snuff, see if the battery's good, and it's not. You know, the battery only puts out 300 cold cranking amps, but it went fully charged and it's good enough for our purposes of testing. So once we did that, I hooked the battery back up, and then we wait. Gave it about an hour, and then decided to come back and do a new school approach. So that's the opposite of old school, and that's where we use our thermal imager. And I start shining it around, and we could see that the TIPM had a little warm spot in it, the cluster was hot, the radio was hot, my wife is hot, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. But we could see all these components that were on, so to speak. Things sat overnight in the shop with a neutral temperature, and we could see after having the battery hooked up for only an hour, a lot of these components are red. Now what do? You know, that's where you can get in trouble. A lot of these guys in the shops have thermal imagers, and, you know, we just start unplugging stuff. Well, you're gonna go down this rabbit trail and never really be able to fix the car. So we put that in our back pocket. We write down, hey, TIPM's hot, you know, radio. You just kind of keep that all in your mind. I seen when I threw the amp clamp around the main battery wire running to the TIPM, you could see this really erratic pattern. It was very consistent, so I shouldn't say erratic, but you would see a high amperage draw, 2 amps, let's say, 10 seconds later drop down to 1, then back to 2, and then back to 1, you know, roundabout way. So I seen that, and I had to come up with a different way of figuring out where's all this power going and what's causing it. So that's when I decided to get out the Pico. It's got a big amp clamp on it. Just tip the TIPM over, take that amp clamp, start just going around the big bundles of wires coming out of the TIPM, and see if you could very quickly narrow down which wires are carrying current. And that really wasn't too difficult to do, because you can grab 5, 6, 10 wires at a time. Yep, I got an amp going here, got an amp going there, and then just start plucking out wires one at a time out of the amp clamp until you find the exact wire that's causing the draw. Throw a zip tie around it, move on to the next bundle, and quickly narrow it down to, you know, 10, 15, 20 wires. And then that's where we're at today. And that's how we get to this point here. So as I, you know, just mentioned, big amp clamp, trying to find out where the current's going, because I was getting some real funny readings trying to do it out of the fuse box. Wasn't working for me. And then these are most of the circuits that I found, just, you know, clipping along, grabbing big bundles of wire with the amp clamp and finding out who's going where. I have all these wires here. I've got these 3 wires here, the single wire down here on this connector, and everything else when I clamped around it, I didn't see a big significant change. So I just took the amp clamp, went around the wires that I have marked, stuck them on that, you know, would start to get my readings, and then added them up here. And I can almost reach the total just by the series of wires that I've narrowed it down to. So I came up with a total of them of 1.910 amps. The total draw when we were clipped around the main wire going into the TIPM was 1.985. So that leaves, 75 milliamps, you know, out in the open. But using an amp clamp, I'm not super concerned when we get down to those final numbers. We found the majority of the draws. I think what I'll do next is look up a connector diagram, see what these wires go to, and then see if we can make an assessment. This seems kind of bizarre. We know that the radio is hot, the cluster is hot, the side of the TIPM is hot, but can we find some kind of connection between everything here that seems to be drawing current, which is kind of bizarre. I don't know if the TIPM is just junk, but, you know, we clip on this, you know, we've got one, well, it just turned off. When it turns back on, it's like 1.277 or something when it turns on. Amp clamps aren't the most accurate tools when it comes to this. But yeah, there we go. So 1.277 while it's turned on. You got to hold the amp clamp straight so the jaws stay shut. And then we'll watch that circuit turn back off just like it was. So it'll repeat the pattern. And then if I go through, you know, and clamp the extra wires on it, you know, obviously we can get up to our total, and they all seem to kind of do the same thing. So we need to find the connection between all of this. So we've got our wire. I think we left off where we found the wires that we're drawing, or most of them, most of the current draw. So I grabbed a picture of the bottom of the tip-em so we can find out what connector's what. And then we can go through in each pin and find out, you know, who's who and what do they power. You know, can we start fitting this all together is the point that I'm at right now. And then looking at the wires, I see we're losing, these are all the wires that have current, you know, going out of them or coming into them, whichever. We have the power liftgate module. So one of the main powers for that on a 30 amp fuse. We've got the power sliding doors on a 40 amp fuse for the left rear. We've got the a ground here that's got current coming back through it for the door lock and unlock relay, front wipers, tip them. And then of course we knew about the radio, the HVAC, the sliding door modules, power lock relay modules, or power locks. Of course the cluster, we saw that that was lit up. And then both of the front door modules. So I'm thinking, so both front door modules, the cluster, the HVAC, the radio, the power liftgate module, you know, the sliding doors. And I'm like, man, this doesn't, you know, not all this stuff's bad, obviously. So what does all this having to do with each other? Well, they, on a Chrysler, they have their interior CAN bus, and guess what runs on all of that? All of this stuff. So I'm thinking there is something that's keeping the interior CAN bus alive, that's keeping these modules all turned on. And we could see that when we were watching that pattern on the scope here, or on the multimeter, we would see it, you know, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. You know, something was turning on, just kept kicking on. And I think all of these modules are powering up. So I'm gonna eat some lunch and try to come up with a plan here and see what we can figure out. For grins and giggles here, I plugged in YTech just to see what I had for codes in, and I had almost 100 codes when I first started. I just cleared them out because I figured people have been fiddling, you know, this came from the used car guys. So I see these are pretty consistent. We have one for the rear wiper park switch input circuit stuck low. The ones that kind of concern me here are this the power liftgate front zone switch circuit high, and the latch release switch performance. So something there, I'm curious to know if we cut the power to this rear liftgate module, if for some reason, if it you know, stops the network from coming alive. Right now, it appears that the whole network is down, everything, you know, I've got the key off. And I was just kind of curious, I was just kind of watching this to see if one of them would turn on randomly, and I haven't seen anything yet. And if you remember, when we were looking at our diagrams here, that was one of our drawers here, this J2, which is a 30 amp. And I just verified on another wiring diagram to make sure that that is what powers the liftgate module, and it appears that it is. I've just got to find it here, wherever J2 is. There's 11, 22. They're kind of all over the place. I'm going to grab some glasses so I can see, and a light. Let's see, oh, okay, there it is, J2. So that is, this should be this guy right here. It's this 30 amp right there, that should be J2. Because that's 6, 14, 2, 19, and 1. All right, we're gonna leave that out. This thing's gotta sit a while for everything to time out. I'm gonna throw the amp clamp back around here. We're just doing the old poke and hope now. Curious if that liftgate module is going stupid and keeping things awake. I'm gonna have to unplug our computer from the data link connector because obviously that's a draw. And then after half hour or so, we'll come back and see what we see. So this is what it looks like, the 0.687 amps. And this is just seconds after, you know, pulling the fuse, making sure the key's off, unplugging the data link connector there from the laptop. But what's interesting is we don't have that spike up up, over, down. You know, it's been going across here long enough. We got 5 minutes on the screen. It was doing that about every, 10 seconds or so. So that's interesting. After about a minute and a half, it dropped down to 290 milliamps, or 279 milliamps, I guess, quarter amp. And I walked by again and seen it was down to 182 after 3.5 minutes. We either fixed it or the amp clamp's dead, one or the other. Well, fixed it, I use that term loosely. Let's see here. You still working, amp clamp? Oh yeah, we're getting some spikies there. No more amperage, baby, or at least immeasurable with the amp clamp. So that's fun. About 10 minutes or so has passed. I think it's about 10 minutes. Yeah, because I think that was on 808. So 10 minutes passed and our draw went away by simply removing a single fuse. Whew. Stick that back in there. Where was it? It's up here. Oh, look at that. Now everybody's pissed off again. So everybody's looking at me like I got 3 heads. Why? Because I didn't wear my hat. But no, because it simply came down to removing a fuse. Now, that didn't fix the car. It proved our concept, though. It proved that the liftgate module is keeping all these other modules powered up. Everything that runs on the interior bus. Or so it seems, anyways. The radio, the cluster. And I guess a couple points I want to make with this video is, A, you got to follow the facts. So earlier, when I started this car yesterday, when I looked at it yesterday, I was using a process that I always use, where we take a meter, and just like I've shown in my video, or in other videos when we're following parasitic draws, we go across each fuse and we see what current is flowing across what fuse, and then let that dictate our diagnosis. But as I'm doing that, there was a lot of fuses that had current flowing across it, and it wasn't making sense to me. It's like, this thing sat for an hour. I'm checking these fuses. There's a little current going here. There's some current going here. Now the current's going up and down, and it was being kind of crazy. So that's why I elected to say, you know what? Let's pop the tip them out. Let's flip it over. Find out what wires this current's going out on. Bring up our list that we did, and see if any of this starts to make sense. Because you get in the game of, yeah, we pull the radio fuse, we pull the cluster fuse, and the current draw starts going down. And we start yanking all these fuses, modules are turning on, modules are turning off. You just waste a whole bunch of freaking time. And even though that this took time, but logically we figured out simply by gathering data, flipping it over, throwing our big amp clamp on there, kind of narrowing it down, picking out 6 or 7 wires at a time, and just throwing clamps on it, who's drawing, who's not, looking at a diagram, figuring out what circuits they belong to, and then kind of saying to ourselves, what do these have to do with each other? And it was the interior data bus. Simple as that. That's staying alive. Why? And then that's when we decided to get out the scan tool. We see that there's codes for brake fluid switch, there's codes for the rear wiper, and then we have these codes for the liftgate module. When you look at the sliding doors on this thing, the wiring harnesses are hanging out of the doors. I mean, this thing's been touched a lot. So you can really rabbit trail down in and around things, or we can use some logic and say, all right, well, this seems to be having a problem. This all makes sense. Let's pluck the fuse out of that. And that's how we got where we are. It's still broke. It still needs fixed. But at this point, we know 100% if we fix that liftgate, whatever's wrong with it, whether the module's bad or the inputs to it are bad. I see it doesn't work. The button in the front does. You push it, it opens, but you push it, it doesn't close. The button in the back doesn't work, it doesn't close. So it has issues, but this is the used car guy too. I can call him and say, hey, you can leave your fuse out and you can work with the gate like it is, or you can put money into it, which is usually not an option with some of the used car guys, and we can fix it the right way. So I'm gonna have to leave that up to him. I'll give him a call and I'll be back to let you know what he says. Show's over, folks. Put things back how you found it, or a little bit better if they're a mess. You gotta get these wires fished back up and around if we can. What's up, Mrs. O?
Brought you something cold.
Ooh, cold beer? Hey, don't stick it down there, old girl. What do you got? Ooh. Pure leaf iced tea, no sugar, all natural.
Just like you.
Just like I was gonna say something, but I didn't, so.
I'm all natural too.
I know you are.
We're the real deal.
Let's see. Well, I was getting ready to tell the people, Mrs. O, the used car guy, we just got denied.
What'd you expect?
Well, I mean, I knew that's what he was gonna say when you give them the option of either A, fixing it properly, or B, leaving the fuse out.
I mean, the thing looks like it's pretty rough.
It's very rough. Some poor sucker's gonna end up with this pile of poo. But that's out of our control.
Yeah.
We do the job we were hired to do. And we're just gonna verify here that we're good. Yeah, so I did talk to the used car guy, folks. He said, of course, just leave the fuse out of it as long as the tailgate works without the button. Everybody will be happy. Told me he's been doing it for 54 years. This is how you do it. So, that's all we need to do.
You could ever be a used car.
I can never be a used car guy, Mrs. O. I'd be broke.
Yeah, you'd be broke, but people that have fixed cars.
They would have good cars, but I would be broke. So, let's see, we did have a connector unplugged there, so I'm gonna let this sit for the 10 minutes. We're gonna verify that it does power back off. I left the fuse out of it. I'll probably put some kind of note under here so nobody sticks the fuse back in it, or perhaps what we could do is take a fuse, rip the guts out of it, and stick it in there. Maybe draw an X across it, you know, leave a note, don't replace this fuse, your battery's gonna die. Do not replace. That's the best I could come up with. At least if somebody says, hey, the power liftgate doesn't work, first thing they might check is the fuse, maybe. Then we're just gonna come and kind of rip the guts out of it here. Like so, just make sure they can't touch. So now that's empty. At least somebody won't see an empty or missing fuse. We can stick that back in there. And then that way when they yank it out, at least somebody might know someday in the future. And that was what, J2 or something, J2, and that is labeled under here as transfer case module, power liftgate module. So it is labeled as something that somebody may look at. So anyhow, and there you are. After about 10 minutes, it calms down to below a readable amount of the amp clamp because these have a tendency to float. We'll zero it out here. Anything below about 50 milliamps, I really don't trust them, but I mean, it's clear that our current draw is far below the specs that it needs to be. I wish I could bring you along on the real fix, folks. You and I both know that removing the fuse is not the problem. You know, it's either an input problem, a stuck switch, you know, the ratchet mechanism or whatever in the back is goofy, you know, so something there is broken, keeping that module alive and awake, therefore keeping all the other interior modules alive and awake and killing the battery. So pulling the fuse, is that the fix? No, it's this guy's fix. So we'll leave it at that. Don't leave me hanging. You go in that comment section, the questions, the comments, the Insta, the Facebook. Y'all know what to do. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.